Coming up, Britain's socialists are fighting for their political life after the Conservatives make a clean sweep of the British election. I'm Barry Cunningham in London.
Too hot.
The things we do to keep us comfortable.
But she's worth it.
That's why she gets Loves. We tried some elastic diapers that cost less, but they didn't all fit like Loves. Look, if they're wide, they bunch up between her legs. Loves is curved like an hourglass to fit comfortably.
Nothing's too good for our little tadpole.
Your baby's comfort begins with love, love. Put your head on my shoulder. Hold me in your arms, baby.
Beautiful moments were made possible by Head & Shoulders, the shampoo for the two of you.
Put your head on my shoulder.
Two amateur sleuths are on a crash course with a murderer. Agatha Christie's Why Didn't They Ask Evans? 7 p.m. Sunday on 5.
Come to 52nd Street and Madison Avenue, Tourneau Corner, for an unsurpassed collection of Tudor watches, including the Chronotime. Tudor by Rolex at Tourneau.
It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?
A man who says violence may be the only way to get the English out of Ireland was elected to the British Parliament, and Margaret Thatcher won a tremendous victory. 3 more Israeli soldiers killed in Lebanon. Here in New York, a convicted killer who was serving life now faces the electric chair. Jason Robards talks about alcoholism. You'll hear from a man who says he can talk to the bees. Stuart Klein reviews a new French movie called The Return of Martin Guerre. Lynn has some great news about the weekend weather. The Mets are home with their new manager. Tom has that, along with the Westchester Golf Classic and his pick in the Belmont Stakes. I'm John Rowland. This is the 10 o'clock news. Good evening. Margaret Thatcher has a lot to celebrate tonight. She now has the biggest majority in the British Parliament in close to 40 years. And she is the second Conservative Prime Minister in this century to win back-to-back terms. But she also has to face some very big problems during the next few years. The deployment of cruise missiles in Britain, her country's big unemployment problem. There is also the question, of course, of Northern Ireland. She will face that directly in Parliament. A member of the political wing of the IRA won a seat. And the Thatcher government says it will lift an exclusion order so that Gerry Adams can travel to London to attend Parliament sessions. And there were bombs as well as ballots in Belfast. A British soldier was killed by a bomb this morning. Christopher Morris will report on that part of the election campaign. But first, Barry Cunningham reports on the victory party at 10 Downing Street.
The victory celebration began at breakfast while Mrs. Thatcher was receiving telephone congratulations from well-wishers, including President Reagan. The Conservative landslide was an anticlimax to the British election. The only question was how many moderate political heads would roll in Mrs. Thatcher's cabinet. She immediately went to Tory headquarters to discuss a government reshuffle, replacing moderate leaders with conservatives. A BBC interviewer asked if she was a good butcher.
I'm not a good butcher, but I've had to learn to carve the joint.
It was the most devastating defeat for the Labour Party since 1918. The search for a scapegoat went no further than Michael Foot, the 69-year-old party leader. Disgruntled Labourites said Mr. Foot was out of touch with the new generation of socialists, that he was still fighting the bloody tooth and claw battles of 50 years ago, that the Labour Party would have to be restructured to survive. The sorest losers were the center road Liberals and Social Democrats, the new third party in Britain. There's no proportional representation here, so although the SDP got 1/4 of the popular vote, the alliance picked up only a handful of seats.
I am very angry that we haven't got more seats out of it, and I do believe that such as the basic sense of fair play and justice in the electorate as a whole, that sense of outrage isn't going to be confined to the people who voted for us.
In the end, it was not just the electoral process or campaign strategy that led to Labor's gruesome defeat. It was her, Mrs. Thatcher, a uniquely American-style politician. The sheer force of a woman's personality dominated the traditional process in which the party that gains the most seats in Parliament sends its Prime Minister to 10 Downing Street. In that sense, Mrs. Thatcher's victory is already being called Britain's presidential election. Barry Cunningham, Metromedia News, London.
Declare that the person elected to serve as member for the said constituency is Gerard Adams.
The result was a disaster for Mr. Fitt, beaten comprehensively into third place, trailing over 6,000 votes behind the winner of the West Belfast seat he'd held for 17 years. Gerry Adams was to claim this as an historic victory, but his political rivals were bitter in defeat, claiming the huge vote for Sinn Féin, the political wing of the provisional IRA, was a vote for violence.
This morning, a British soldier was killed in Ballymurphy. The responsibility for that soldier's death lies with the British government.
There were scenes of chaos as the Sinn Féin vice president was escorted from Belfast City Hall, protected by armed police, as loyalist politicians and campaign workers angrily shouted abuse. Along the Falls Road in the heart of West Belfast, Mr. Adams' supporters were already out celebrating. A march of triumph which he joined along the road which has seen so much violence in recent years.
3 Israeli soldiers were killed, 1 wounded, and another captured in southern Lebanon today. They were ambushed by guerrillas hiding in a lemon grove. A group called the Lebanese National Resistance Front claimed responsibility for the attack. Earlier this week, 2 Israeli soldiers were killed in a car bombing.
And America took another swipe at Nicaragua today. The Civil Aeronautics Board took away permission for the Nicaraguan airline to make charter flights into Miami. The airline will still be able to fly between Managua and New York on its regular schedule. Earlier this week, America threw out 21 Nicaraguan diplomats in retaliation for Nicaragua throwing out 3 Americans. One of them stayed, though. He wants political asylum. So when Mr. Reagan's special envoy showed up in Nicaragua today, he was snubbed, really. Only a low-level official greeted him. Later, Richard Stone did get to see Nicaragua's foreign minister. The atmosphere was described as very tense, and officials say privately this visit by Stone will not improve things.
And the White House today criticized Moscow for attacking President Reagan's latest nuclear arms reduction plan. The Soviet Union said the Reagan proposal will give the U.S. military superiority. And in Paris, the U.S. and its NATO allies gave final approval to the deployment of nuclear missiles in Europe. That's if the Soviet Union and the U.S. don't reach an agreement at the Geneva arms talks. And in West Germany, a U.S. Army truck carrying 3 Hawk missiles flipped over on a highway. 2 soldiers were hurt, but the missiles did not explode.
Still ahead, Lemuel Smith may be the first man to die in New York's electric chair in 20 years. And we'll take a close look at the White Tigers gang. It's linked to extortion at city massage parlors. And a look at a man who said he could talk some bees into a box, and he did.
BMW presents the only form of interior decoration that ever made a luxury car perform better. Such decorations as an engine driven by microprocessors, with an electronic system that actually calculates when service is needed, and a suspension based on a design so advanced it has earned an international patent. The BMW 528e, the difference between advanced gimmickry and advanced technology.
There's a world of possibilities when it comes to computers. The professionals at Computerland make it easy to find the right one for you. At Computerland, we make it our business to help you with your business, so we offer simple, cost-effective leasing. This IBM business system can be working for you for $99 a month. Come in and ask for the leasing plan from Computerland. Only at these locations: Carl Place, Comac, Eatontown, Little Neck, Midtown Manhattan, Morristown, Paramus, Somerville, Wall Street.
Linda and Richard have been living together for 5 years. While Richard went to medical school, Linda gave up law school and supported Richard. Now Richard's a doctor and they're splitting up. Should Richard pay for Linda's law school expenses? Her lawyer, Marvin Mitchelson, says,
Isn't what's fair for the goose fair for the gander?
His lawyer, Adrian Burb, says
neither of them owes them each other anything.
Make your own decision right here on Miller's Court.
Miller's Court, 7 p.m. Saturday on Channel 5.
A man by the name of Lemuel Smith was in Greenhaven Prison back in 1981. He was serving life for 2 murders. Well, he's back there again tonight, but this time he is on death row. That's because he killed a woman guard back in '81, and he was sentenced to die in the electric chair today. He's sentenced to die next month. Now, there has not been an execution in New York in 20 years, and it will be years before Smith is executed, if he ever is. The appeals alone will take years. There is also the constitutional test of the capital punishment law in this state, the only one left here in New York that permits death when a prisoner serving life for murder kills again.
A 4-alarm fire in Jersey City gutted a row of houses and forced 80 people out of their homes today. The fire broke out early this morning in the city's Greenville section. Firemen say the blaze started when a short circuit ignited a mattress. A mother, her 2 children, and a fireman were treated for smoke inhalation and minor injuries.
There's a losing figure that the banks are talking about these days that is really incredible. And of course, it's one the customers have to pay for. Something like $200 million. That's what the banks say they will lose this year thanks to fraud involving credit cards.
It may look like plastic, but it's really money. That's the new national slogan adopted today by the American Bankers Association Bank Card Fraud Task Force. Today, more than 100 bankers met here to discuss what they're calling America's fastest growing crime.
Bank and credit card fraud is growing so fast, according to the ABA, that unless something is done soon, banks could lose $2 billion to card fraud by 1985. Thus, these sophisticated videotapes shown to reporters and bankers today to help them understand the problem. The ABA says there are 3 categories of bank and credit card fraud: stolen cards, stolen card blanks, and stolen information. Today, officials told bankers from across the country there are 3 don'ts for cardholders. Don't carry around cards you never use, don't reveal your card number to telephone survey takers, and don't take your time in reporting the lost card. Besides customer awareness, officials are studying ways of making more sophisticated special codes on magnetic tape.
If we were able to put a hologram or have the card as a hologram, you could not counterfeit the card or reproduce the card. In a card like this where we use a Valoron or a material, once the card is embossed, it becomes colored. It could not be de-embossed or changed. You could not put another number on it or altered.
And Donlan says these 2 types of cards would cost only pennies more to make and could begin replacing the more standard cards within a few months. From the Grand Hyatt Hotel, McGee Hickey, Channel 5 News.
Well, last night we told you that 14 young men were arrested on kidnapping charges. They allegedly kidnapped 3 Korean girls and forced them to work in a massage parlor downtown. Now, some of the suspects are believed to be members of a Chinese gang. Ron Claiborne takes a look at that gang, known as the White Tigers.
At least 6 of the suspects charged with forcing 3 Korean girls to work in a Manhattan massage parlor are reputed members of a Chinese gang called the White Tigers. The White Tigers are a Chinatown gang that now operates mostly in Queens. 9 of the suspects were arrested at this apartment building here on 75th Street in the Elmhurst section of Queens. It was here that police say that 2 of the 3 girls were kept while they worked at the massage parlor. Only a short distance away is Newtown High School and the Queens Center Mall. Police say members of the White Tigers are often seen hanging out in the Queens Center Mall. It's also believed that they recruit members at and around Newtown High School, just a few blocks away. Police also say the gangs prey on Chinese businesses in Flushing and Elmhurst. According to police, their traditional activity is shaking them down for protection money. The alleged incident involving the Korean-American girls is apparently a new enterprise for the group.
We feel that the extortion of money directly does occur. We're not aware of a previous instance where the gang members have put their own girls directly into service, or I wouldn't call them their own girls, but have put girls directly into a premise.
But did some of the suspects go all the way to California just to get these girls?
We can't determine that, or at least we haven't been able to. We don't know whether they were in California and brought the girls back and then decided to put them in service, or whether they went out there with the express intention of getting girls to bring back.
Kelly says it appears the gang may have forced the owners of the massage parlor to accept the girls as employees. The suspects allegedly took in about $100 a day from each of the captive girls. Police say they don't know for sure, but they suspect that this new kind of extortion may be becoming increasingly common as a form of protection rackets. Ron Claiborne, Channel 5 News.
The MTA has a committee looking into subway derailments, and there have been 9 of them so far this year. It wants to find out if there is any one common problem. The man who runs the subways, John Simpson, says he knows why a train derailed on Monday at 53rd and 5th Avenue here in Manhattan. The train had a broken part, and it should have been in the repair shop. Instead, someone had signed that train back into service before the repairs were made. The transit authority is looking for that someone. Coming up, some more good news about the economy, and actor Jason Robards is one of the witnesses at a hearing on alcoholism and older Americans.
Moving your office into the future can be a very shocking experience. But at Exxon Office Systems, we can help you move into the future without the shock. Our upgradable Exxon 500 series information processor lets you start small and grow big, all the way up to our fully functioned Exxon 8400 series office automation system. So if you're moving into an office of the future, start with the information processor that really has a future. The Exxon 500 series information processor.
Good job, Jim. Gosh, thanks, Dad.
For more information, call 800-327-6666. Exxon Office Systems. It's the future without the shock.
A free inspection at Midas will tell you if your brakes need fixing. Or you can find out for yourself, which can cost more.
Wholesale prices went up last month, but only by 0.3%, and that's less than a lot of the experts were predicting. And store sales were up just over 2% last month, a good sign of the recovery. And after the stock market closed, the Federal Reserve said the basic money supply was up $100 million last week. And that was less than the experts were predicting, so Wall Street had a pretty good day. Dow Industrials were up more than 7 points. An average share of stock in the big board was up 23 cents. Gainers over losers almost 2-1. Amex average share was up 15 cents. Gainers over losers 5-3.
The Labor Department said today that some 6,000 more people filed claims for unemployment in the last week of May. That brought the total number of new claims close to 500,000, and some New Jersey workers may be filing for unemployment. GE is shutting down one of its plants in Newark. As Steve Dunlop reports, 140 people may lose their jobs.
This General Electric plant has been a New Jersey landmark for 70 years. At the height of its capacity in the early 1970s, 550 people worked here. It was the only manufacturing facility for GE light bulbs on the entire East Coast.
It wasn't just Japanese competition that spelled the end for this plant. It was also an increasingly flat market for light bulbs here at home.
There's no growth left like there was 5-10 years ago. And with that, in order to be competitive and stay in the lamp business, we have to consolidate our capacity.
Bob Crispin has been a GE trucker for 30 years.
Good. You know, it's like a shock. It really hasn't set in yet there. We just heard about it 2 days ago, and I can't believe it.
You know, everybody, you get to a job and you say, well, this is my last thing. I'm not going to, by the time I get 65, then I can retire. But it seems like nothing is for sure anymore. Nothing.
The president of the plant's union says that over the years, it had suggested a number of ways to save the GE facility.
We told them that the plant should be upgraded, the conditions of the plant improved, that we would get together with the employees and the management to improve efficiency if that was a problem, but there was no dialogue.
We've done everything we possibly can to stay competitive, and we've done that up until the end, and we'll do that till the day we close.
Does that include listening to suggestions from the union?
All suggestions, and that's why we've made so many improvements in the building.
Of the 140 workers whose jobs will be phased out with this plant over the next year, GE says more than half will be eligible for early retirement, and others will continue receiving medical and life insurance coverage.
But all the fringe benefits in the world still don't add up to a job. More than being shocked about this GE plant's closing, one worker told me, these people are hurting. From the GE facility in Newark, Steve Dunlop, Channel 5 News.
Well, there is one very visible sign of the recovery in one segment of the economy. The travel business is making a big recovery. Christopher Jones has the proof.
There have been all kinds of statistics thrown around recently to prove that Americans are traveling in record numbers this year, but there is nothing like a picture to prove it. And you are looking at a picture of procrastination. These folks are lined up outside the passport office in Rockefeller Center, waiting for their turn to speak to an official to get their passports to go abroad. They could have done it a little bit earlier, but evidently they did not. They are all part of the new boom in travel, especially international big-ticket travel.
There are 13 passport agencies throughout the United States. And of those 13, there is a 24% increase this year so far over what there was in 1982. And 1982 was 17% increase over 1981.
So you're talking about a record year.
Oh, we're talking about a record year and a lot of applicants and passports.
At this time last year, many people, even if they had jobs, were afraid to spend any of their savings, thinking that the economy might get worse, either their business would go down or they'd in fact lose their jobs. This year I think there's a lot more security throughout the United States with respect to people spending their money for that annual vacation that they would like to take.
The U.S. traveler's currency buys more, good value for money. Second major reason is that the prime trade routes we serve, particularly Europe, Americans have a remarkable affinity for. Most people in this country, in one way or another, trace their roots back to Europe. And it is a place where people will go more than once. And they've been missing it the last couple of years due to economic conditions. So you've got a lot of pent-up demand for international destinations right now.
So more Americans than ever before are going to go to Europe. Great news for the travel agencies and for the airline companies. Not so good for you if you've left your plans until the last minute. If you are looking for that passport you've put off getting, don't come here to Fifth Avenue or to another major United States passport office unless you are in a supreme hurry, because you'll wait in a line that's going to ruin your day. Go to your post office or to a court clerk. They can do the same thing for you by mail. Christopher Jones, Channel 5 News.
Well, as New Yorkers, sometimes we think we've seen it all. But today, there was a swarm in Manhattan, and even the police didn't know how to handle it. John Miller has the story.
What do you do with 2,000 bees who land on the sidewalk in front of Temple Emmanuel and decide to stay? That very question was faced by officers Tom DeRosa and Larry Callahan of the 19th Precinct. Their dispatcher, not finding an appropriate code number, had, in an attempt to stick as closely as possible to police jargon, dispatched them to investigate a bee condition. To make matters more complex, when the two cops arrived, they were met by Luis Lopez, formerly of Ecuador, who insisted he could talk to the bees. The two officers decided that Lopez had a low credibility factor and asked him to go home. Lopez was persistent.
Roll up your window, please. Dangerous condition here.
Traffic slowed to watch. Officer DeRosa told motorists to roll up their windows just to be safe. And then, as any good cop will do in the throes of an unusual incident, they called for a sergeant. Keeping people away seemed to be a problem. Some people ignored the officers, only to be surprised as they almost walked over the busy swarm of bees. And Lopez, who had started by trying to coax the bees into a bag, was now back carrying a box. Officer DeRosa told Lopez if he didn't beat it, he'd get locked up. Lopez, however, was still insistent that being from Ecuador, he could talk to the bees. This, he said, was done with a kissing noise, which he demonstrated. The two cops began to consider an ambulance more appropriate.
I don't know, the wheel, they attach everybody. They talk for you. 5 minutes you have now. 5 minutes, no coming, they pick it up. You know, and the queen in the back.
There was just no stopping Lopez, or pedestrians who boldly stepped over the police lines only to change their minds a minute later. The two cops, DeRosa and Callahan, were finally worn out. So Lopez walked down the street, lit a cigarette, and promptly began to organize. Single file, rows of 3, he said. The bees mysteriously began to obey, one by one, and soon in groups they began to get into the box.
Lopez, while talking to the bees, said that they would follow the queen, so between kissing noises, he would ask the bees which one was the queen. He asked this in English and in Spanish.
Vaya donde está la queen. ¿Dónde está la reina? Please.
Finally, after some time of this, a reporter who is frankly afraid of bees gingerly offered a roll of gaffer's tape for Lopez to seal the box with. As people watched in bewilderment, Lopez and Officer DeRosa, who had apparently by now become a believer, worked side by side to seal the box, which was now filled with bees. And so the cops went back on patrol, and Lopez walked off into the New York sunset with his box of bees. Where they came from, nobody knows. Where he took them, we didn't ask. John Miller, Channel 5 News.
Still to come, there was a near collision above the president. And we'll tell you how lasers are being used to solve crimes.
Volkswagen announces a new concept. Too much car for the money. Introducing the Wolfsburg Limited Edition Rabbit. Your choice of automatic or 5-speed stick with fuel injection, power steering, velour seats, and much, much more. This car should cost a small fortune, but now you can get this car for only $69.90. The Wolfsburg Limited Edition Rabbit.
Looking for a powerful home computer? This is the one. Texas Instruments home computer. With 16K memory, it can take you a long way. Want a computer with a lot of software? Oh, yeah, this is the one. The TI home computer gives you more of these software cartridges than any computer in the world. The whole world. So, with all the power you have here to run all the power here, this is the one. The home computer from Texas Instruments. This is the one.
Welcome to New York, pal. The Milford Plaza, please. Hey, great hotel. Come on along, I'll take you to...
Word's getting around.
Lullaby of Broadway.
With room, dinner, cocktail, and breakfast for $39 per person, we really are the lullaby of Broadway.
Hey, the Milford Plaza may be in the center of the theater district, but don't expect any singing or dancing. That's strictly on TV.
The Milford Plaza is the lullaby of all Broadway.
Welcome to Quebec. There's nothing like Quebec City.
Come with me, I'll show you.
Explore its corners. Its hospitality goes back for centuries.
It's delicious.
Find a hidden resort. And a big city, Montreal. Walk back to yesterday or live for today. Wander it day or night. Discover la différence. Call for a free brochure. Quebec, the vacation with la différence.
Last night we told you about President Reagan's visit to Minnesota. We just found out today there was a very dramatic incident right above his motorcade as he was leaving the Minneapolis airport. A state police helicopter guarding the motorcade came within 300 feet of an airliner. Both pilots swerved to avoid the collision. The Western Airlines 727 landed safely. It had 144 people on board. Officials are trying to find out now why the planes were allowed to get so close.
And during his trip to Minnesota yesterday, President Reagan again told educators that he is not cutting spending for education. The president said that he's just cutting the amount of new spending being requested. Today, Democratic leaders in Congress accused him of trying to destroy federal education programs. And House Democratic leader Jim Wright claimed the president was lying about spending cuts. Wright says that education spending is being reduced drastically.
There was a very heated money debate in the U.S. Senate today. It had nothing to do with the federal budget money. That was put off until Tuesday. The senators were talking about their own money. Right now, they make over $60,000 a year in salary, but some of them make at least that much, sometimes twice that, by making speeches around the country. Publicity about just how much money some senators were making prompted a vote to limit outside income. That was yesterday. Today, some senators were trying to raise the limit. Tina Galland reports.
Last year, Senator Robert Dole was the big winner, pulling in more than $135,000 giving speeches. That's over and above his $60,000 Senate salary. The runner-up, Ernest Hollings, who made more than $92,000 on the speech-making circuit. These 4 senators also made more money making speeches than making laws last year. Under the limits agreed to yesterday, no member could make more than $18,200 a year in speaking fees. A considerable jolt to the 54 senators who made more than that in honorariums last year. One option would be to keep the cap on outside earnings but hike salaries. David Keating of the National Taxpayers Union, a group opposed to higher government spending, says the American people should exact a price for a Senate pay raise.
We should put Congress on an incentive plan. If Congress actually balances the budget, which they haven't done in over 14 years, to get the economy back on track and lower our taxes, I'd be more than happy to support a pay increase for congressmen and senators.
We have not heard the final word on Senate pay. Lawmakers can change their minds, and that's probably what will happen. They will either take the lid off what they can earn making speeches, or they'll vote to boost their salaries. If they don't do something, senators will continue to make $9,000 less than their colleagues in the House. Tina Galan, Metro Media News, Capitol Hill.
Well, the Israeli and Lebanese governments are still working out the details of their peace accord. The United States has taken an active part in those negotiations, and some people think that the Soviet Union should also join in. That's the subject of tonight's debate between Dr. Martin Abin and Professor Sidney Offutt.
It's time the Soviet Union was invited to join the Lebanon peace talks. Negotiations without the Soviet Union are limited, and peace, no matter how enthusiastically arrived at, will never really exist in the Middle East without the concurrence of the Soviet Union. The United States and Israel must know that, and certainly, too, the Arabs and the PLO, as well as the Syrians, are aware of it. By inviting the Soviets to join the peace talks, we are not endorsing their system, nor are we confessing to weakness. What we would be doing is acting in a realistic and responsible manner. For so long as the Soviet Union is willing to act as provocateur in the Middle East and supply arms, there can be no lasting peace there.
You said it, Professor Offutt. The Soviet Union acts as provocateur and arms supplier in the Mideast to the PLO and to the warlike Syrians. And that is the reason we should have nothing to do with them, particularly at a negotiation table. Let us all take a look at the map once in a while, Professor Offutt. You will note that the Mideast is about 700 or 800 miles away from the nearest Soviet air base across the Black Sea. That means that the Near East is very much near indeed to the Soviet Union, and the Soviets have an ongoing interest in taking over there in a real fashion. Therefore, we, realizing that, should never bring them into any kind of meaningful talks.
Well, Dr. Abin, that's a response that's rather knee-jerk conservative. Mention the Soviet Union, and the foot springs out and you try to kick him out. But you yourself admit that they are absolutely crucial in the Middle East, so why not invite them to the peace talks? The tragedy of this is that the Israelis pay the greatest price because the Russians are not involved in the peace discussions. No matter how bold or imaginative their programs, no matter how many times they destroy Arab armies, so long as there are Arabs willing to take up arms and Russians willing to supply them, there will be no peace in the Middle East.
That does not mean, Professor Offutt, that you set the wolf to watch over the chickens. And that is what you would be doing if you gave the Soviet Union any kind of say or power in the Mideast. It is true that it is a standoff, but we must continue in that position because we are dealing with an enemy, the Soviet Union, that is implacably involved and implacably determined to take over not only in the Mideast, but elsewhere in the world. You shall not surrender to that kind of a threat, no matter what, I say.
We have a lot more news coming up for you. The space shuttle paid a visit to our area today, a hearing on alcoholism in older Americans, how lasers are being used to solve crimes. Lynn has some terrific news about the weekend weather. Stu reviews a new French movie called The Return of Martin Guerre. Tom McDonald has all the sports, plus he is picked for the Belmont. And McGee Hickey visits the men of the very funny Trocadero Ballet.
It's here, the '84 Ford Tempo, America's all-new aerodynamic sedan.
Tempo has the world's most advanced automotive computer. It continually monitors 7 vital engine functions for maximum fuel efficiency and a quick power response. All this plus an interior with more rear room than a Mercedes 300D. Tempo, style and technology in total harmony. Have you driven a Ford lately?
Now, DHL Express delivers the U.S. for Ted Turner.
My cable network keeps America ahead with 24-hour news. And DHL keeps me ahead with time-critical deliveries overnight in the U.S. DHL is the #1 air courier worldwide, making more on-time deliveries to more places around the world than anybody. I want my Braves to deliver like that.
DHL, next best thing to taking it there yourself.
Over a year ago, Newmark and Lewis made you a promise that would always beat the competition's price. Well, we've kept that promise. Over 270,000 people, enough to fill Yankee Stadium 5 times, have taken advantage of our guarantee and saved on TV and video recorders, saved on major appliances, saved on audio equipment, saved on computers and telephones. At Newmark and Lewis, we'll always beat the competition's price. And don't forget, I personally guarantee it.
Take it from me, Dennis James. Don't miss the 2 for sale at Bonds. Choose any 2 suits from Bonds' huge selection of famous brands and get both at a special 2 for price. Famous label vested suits, 2 for $179. Vested wool blend tropicals and 4-piece matchmaker suits, 2 for $269. Eagle clothes and international designer suits also at 2 for prices. And for Father's Day, sports coats, slacks, designer shirts and ties, also at terrific 2 for prices. Get the Bonds 2 for sale tomorrow.
You too can have legs like these. To find out how, watch our second installment on Sexy Legs tomorrow, live and kicking on Saturday morning. This is a dirty job, but someone has to do it.
I hope you got a chance to see the space shuttle flying over the city this afternoon. It was really a magnificent sight.